The battle was finally over. Smoke and debris drifted in the cold void, and the wreckage of Karth Dominion warships floated silently like shattered bones. The Galactic Alliance fleet had won a victory that would be remembered for years. Among the heroes of the day stood Sergeant Daniel Rourke, a human soldier with short dark hair, a scar running across his left cheek, and a calm gaze that never wavered, even in the middle of chaos. The Alliance had not expected to win. The Karth Dominion had been larger, stronger, and far more ruthless, but Daniel's small strike team had slipped deep into enemy lines and destroyed a crucial command ship. Without their leader, the Karth fleet fell apart. The Alliance High Council decided such bravery deserved a public reward. The ceremony was held aboard the massive Alliance flagship, with banners hanging in the wide hall. Dozens of soldiers stood in a row as their names were called. The rewards were strange by human standards. In Alliance culture, warriors were sometimes given wealth, starships, or even servants from among captured enemies. It was meant to honor the victor and humiliate the defeated. Most soldiers chose something grand: crates of alien jewels, powerful weapons, or skilled workers who could serve them for life. When it was Daniel's turn, the hall grew quiet. Everyone expected him to ask for something valuable, maybe a fast ship or a strong warrior from the enemy ranks. But Daniel's eyes swept over the group of captured prisoners brought in for display. They stood in a line, guarded by soldiers, their wrists bound by glowing restraints. At the very end of the line was a small figure. She was unlike the others, thin, pale-skinned, with delicate features and bright silver eyes that avoided everyone's gaze. Her hair was white like frost, and she stood slightly hunched, as if trying to make herself invisible. Compared to the tall, muscular Karth soldiers beside her, she looked fragile, weak. She didn't meet Daniel's eyes, but for a brief moment, he saw her glance upward, then quickly look away. Daniel raised his hand and spoke clearly. "I choose her." A murmur rippled through the room. "Her?" one Alliance officer asked, confused. "Sergeant, that is. Well, she is no fighter. She's from a servant caste. She can't lift a weapon." Some soldiers chuckled under their breath. Others whispered that perhaps Daniel was taking pity on the weakest of the captives. But Daniel's voice was steady. "Yes, her. That is my choice." The High Council leader frowned slightly but nodded. "Very well. The woman will be transferred to your care." The ceremony continued, but many eyes kept drifting toward Daniel, wondering why a celebrated human soldier would waste his reward on someone who looked as if she could be knocked over by a strong wind. Later, in the quiet of his assigned quarters, Daniel watched as the guards removed the restraints from the woman's wrists. She rubbed them gently, not looking up. "You have a name?" Daniel asked. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Lyra." Daniel nodded. "You're Valari, aren't you?" She looked at him in surprise. Few outside her people even knew the name of her race. "Yes, but my world is gone. The Karth took everything." He handed her a small container of water. She accepted it with both hands, drinking slowly, as if she hadn't tasted clean water in a long time. Most soldiers, after a victory, would treat their reward as property. Daniel did not. He pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "You were not always a servant," he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, she looked at him directly. "Why do you say that?" "Because your posture isn't that of a slave," Daniel said. "You lower your head now, but your shoulders remember standing tall. And the way you looked at the council chamber, not with fear, but with calculation." Lyra said nothing. She simply looked down again, the silver in her eyes dimming. Daniel didn't press further. Instead, he changed the subject. "You'll have food and safety here. No one will harm you while you're with me." She gave a small nod, but her hands tightened slightly in her lap. That night, Daniel lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He knew the others thought he was a fool. They thought he had chosen a fragile alien woman out of pity. But they were wrong. Daniel had seen something around her neck when she was brought into the hall. A chain with a small old pendant, almost hidden beneath her tunic. It was a faded crest, but Daniel recognized it instantly. Years ago, in a classified Alliance mission, he had studied that very symbol in ancient records. It belonged to the Valari royal family, a bloodline believed to have been wiped out by the Karth Dominion during their conquest. If the pendant was real, then Lyra was no ordinary prisoner. She might be the last surviving Valari royal, and if the legends were true, that meant she carried knowledge and access to something far greater than any treasure the Alliance could offer. Daniel closed his eyes, making a silent promise. He hadn't chosen her out of kindness. He had chosen her because he knew exactly who she really was, and he intended to find out what secrets she was hiding. The ship carrying Sergeant Daniel Rourke and Lyra drifted quietly through Alliance space. Outside the viewports, the stars shone like frozen sparks in the endless dark. Inside, the corridors were calm, but tension lingered, not from battle, but from the curious stares of other soldiers. Everyone on board had heard the story. The human hero had chosen the weakest of the captured aliens as his reward. To most, it made no sense. She wasn't a fighter, an engineer, or even someone who looked like she could survive the harsh life of a soldier's camp. Daniel didn't care what they thought. Lyra spent most of her time in the small quarters assigned to her. She sat quietly on the narrow bench by the wall, her silver eyes always lowered. She spoke little, and when she did, her voice was soft, as if she had forgotten how to speak loudly. Daniel entered the room carrying a tray. "Brought you something," he said, setting it down. The smell of warm food filled the air. She hesitated before touching it, glancing at him as if expecting some hidden reason. "Why are you kind to me?" she asked at last. Daniel shrugged. "Because you've had enough cruelty already." That answer seemed to puzzle her. Later that day, he sat across from her with a data pad. "I need help," he said, tapping the screen. "These are star charts from before the Karth War. Some are incomplete. Can you read them?" Her eyes scanned the display. At first, she kept her expression blank, but then Daniel noticed a tiny change. Her pupils widened slightly, and her hand hovered just above the screen. "You've seen these routes before," Daniel said quietly. Lyra shook her head. "No, they are old. No one uses them now." "That's not what I asked," Daniel replied. She pressed her lips together, avoiding his gaze. Over the next few days, Daniel tested her in small ways. He would leave books written in rare languages on the table, and when he returned, he would find them slightly moved, as if she had read them. Once, he mentioned an ancient Alliance battle, and she corrected the date without thinking. Bit by bit, Daniel saw the truth. Lyra was far from ignorant. She carried knowledge she was trying very hard to hide. One evening, while the rest of the crew was asleep, Daniel brought out a small object wrapped in cloth. He placed it gently in front of her. She froze when she saw it. A thin golden emblem shaped like a rising star above a curved horizon. Her fingers trembled. "Where did you get this?" "I found it years ago," Daniel said. "Valari Royal. Crest. There aren't many left. Most were destroyed when the Karth took your homeworld." Her voice grew quieter. "Then you know what it means." "I know enough to recognize it," Daniel replied. "And I saw a similar one around your neck during the surrender." Her hand went to her collar instinctively, covering the pendant beneath. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, her voice broke the silence. "If you know, then you understand why I cannot tell anyone." Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because someone might try to use you. Her eyes met his, sharp now instead of timid. Not might, will. The Karth want me dead. And some in the Alliance would want me as a symbol, a tool to rally their fleets. Neither would see me as a person. Daniel nodded slowly. And the weapon? Her eyes widened. So you do know the stories. Only the whispers, Daniel said. A weapon your people built before the Karth came. Something hidden, something only the royal bloodline could control. Lyra's shoulders slumped. It's not a weapon in the way most think. It is more than that. But dangerous, yes. If the wrong hands touched it, entire star systems could be lost. The hum of the ship's engines filled the quiet between them. Daniel studied her. She no longer looked just fragile. There was a strength there now. A spark hidden under years of fear. You're safer here, Daniel said. No one on this ship knows the truth except me. Lyra tilted her head slightly. And why do you keep it secret? You could give me to the Alliance and be rewarded again. Daniel's reply was simple. Because I didn't choose you for a reward. I chose you because you matter, and I don't trust the Alliance with you any more than I trust the Karth. For the first time since they met, Lyra's expression softened into something close to trust. But safety never lasts in wartime. A day later, as the ship docked at an Alliance station for supplies, Daniel noticed something. A pair of officers he didn't recognize seemed to be watching them. Whenever Lyra left the room, their eyes followed her. That night, when Daniel returned to his quarters, he found a small note slid under the door. The handwriting was neat and alien. She is not what she seems, others know. Be careful. Daniel folded the note, his jaw tightening. He had been right. Word was spreading. He looked at Lyra, who was sitting quietly, unaware of the danger closing in. If others learned she was the last Valari royal, they would come for her. Not to help, but to claim her. And when they did, Daniel knew they would stop at nothing. The fragile peace aboard the ship was already breaking. The docking station's wide metal corridors echoed with the sound of boots, machinery, and distant announcements. Daniel kept his pace steady, but his eyes scanned every shadow. The warning note in his pocket felt heavier than his sidearm. Lyra walked beside him, her head lowered in her usual quiet way, but Daniel could tell she felt uneasy. She glanced at every group of strangers they passed. You're walking too close to the wall, Daniel said softly. Looks like you're trying to disappear. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Isn't that what you want? Not. When people are looking for you, he replied. They reached the supply office, where a tired-looking quartermaster handed Daniel a data pad. Standard resupply. Sign here. While Daniel went over the list, he noticed two figures lingering near the doorway, the same ones he'd seen before. They pretended to study a wall panel, but their eyes flicked toward Lyra more than once. Daniel signed quickly and led Lyra back toward the ship. He didn't speak until the docking station's noise faded behind them. Those two in the corner, he said. You've seen them before? She shook her head. No. Should I have? No, Daniel said. But they've seen you twice now. Back on the ship, Daniel locked the door to his quarters and sat opposite her. We need to stop pretending, he said. Someone else knows who you are. That note wasn't a guess. It was a warning. Lyra's silver eyes narrowed. And if they do? The Alliance is vast. They cannot reach me everywhere. Daniel leaned forward. They don't have to reach you everywhere. They just have to be here now. You think they'll knock politely? No. They'll take you, and whatever you know, and vanish. For a long time, Lyra was silent. Then she stood and paced the small room, her hands clasped tightly. Finally, she spoke. My name, my true name, is Lyra Valara. I am the last living child of the House of Valara. the royal family of my people. Daniel didn't react. He had already guessed. But hearing it aloud still carried weight. She turned toward him, her voice sharper now. When the Karth invaded, they destroyed our fleets, our cities, our history. But they wanted more than control. They wanted erasure. They hunted my family until none were left, except me. I was hidden away by loyalists, moved from world to world until I was captured. Daniel's brow furrowed. And the weapon? Lyra hesitated. It is called the Crown of the Stars, not a crown to wear, but an ancient device built into the shattered moon of my world. It is not like your missiles or energy cannons. It can disable every ship in a system, drain their power, leave them helpless. Which means, Daniel said slowly, whoever controls it controls the battlefield. Yes, Lyra replied, but it can only be activated by one of Valari blood, and only guided by a human mind. Daniel blinked. A human mind? She nodded. Our scientists could not build certain parts. Your people's neural systems? They are different. The crown was made with that in mind. It was to be a weapon of alliance, never of conquest. Daniel leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. That explains why both the Karth and the Alliance would want you. And why you've been hiding. Lyra's eyes softened for a moment. You understand now why I feared you would hand me over. He shook his head. Not my style. I don't hand over friends to people who'd use them as tools. Something in her expression shifted. A small flicker of trust breaking through her guarded mask. But their conversation was interrupted by a faint beeping from Daniel's wrist comm. He tapped it, and the face of Lieutenant Harvin, one of the ship's security officers, appeared. Sergeant, you might want to know, we just turned away 2 civilians asking about your companion. Claimed they were here for trade, but they knew her description down to the color of her hair. Daniel's jaw tightened. Understood. Keep an eye on them. He cut the connection. They're here already, Daniel said, standing. We can't stay docked. We leave now. Within the hour, the ship detached from the station, its engines humming to life. Daniel stayed in the pilot's chair while the crew worked. He could feel eyes on him, not from his own people, but from somewhere out there. Lyra appeared beside him. If they know, they will keep following. You cannot outrun the entire galaxy. Daniel gave a faint smile. Maybe not. But I can. Make them chase the wrong trail. He opened a star chart and pointed at a cluster of unmarked systems. Old Valari hyperspace routes still work, right? Her eyes widened slightly. How do you know about those? Daniel didn't answer. Show me which one leads closest to your homeworld. She hesitated, then leaned over the chart. Her finger traced a faint line, almost invisible against the map. Here. But it will not be safe. These paths are forgotten for a reason. Good, Daniel said. That means fewer people looking. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, Lyra stood quietly at the viewport, watching the swirling blue tunnel of light. Her voice was low but certain. If we reach Valara Prime, and if the crown still works, we can end this war in a single day. Daniel glanced at her. And if it doesn't? She didn't look away from the stars. Then I will have brought you across the galaxy for nothing, and we will both die. Daniel leaned back, unshaken. Then we'd better make sure it works. Somewhere in the endless dark, others were following. Alliance spies, Karth agents, maybe worse. But Daniel had made his choice the moment he pointed to her in that hall, and he wasn't going to let anyone else take her. The ship glided through hyperspace, its engines humming steadily. The swirling blue tunnel outside the viewports gave the illusion of safety. But Daniel Rourke knew better. Hyperspace only hid them from sight, not from pursuit. He sat in the pilot's seat, scanning the long-range sensors. No signs of a tail, he muttered. though his tone was cautious, not relaxed. Lyra stood behind him, her pale hands resting lightly on the back of his chair. "You don't believe that," she said softly. "No," Daniel replied. "Because when someone wants you badly enough, they don't stop just because they lose sight of you." Hours passed quietly until a faint ping lit up the console. Daniel leaned forward. The signal was weak, almost hidden under background noise. "They found us," he said flatly. Before Lyra could speak, the ship shuddered violently. The hyperspace tunnel around them warped and alarms blared. Daniel's hands flew over the controls. "They dropped us out early!" Stars snapped back into view. And with them, 3 sleek ships, black and angular, sliding toward them like hunting beasts. "They're not Karth," Daniel said, narrowing his eyes. "Too small. Too fast. Assassins. Maybe bounty hunters." The lead ship fired. A bright beam lanced toward them, grazing the hull. Daniel threw the ship into a roll, the metal creaking under the strain. "Get to the rear compartment," he barked. But Lyra didn't move. "If they board, they will kill you first." Daniel shot her a sharp look. "And you think I'm going to let them get that far? Move!" She hesitated, then ran toward the back as Daniel spun the ship into a desperate evasive path. His smaller vessel could outturn the attackers, but it lacked heavy weapons. The second blast struck their shields, making the lights flicker. A sharp beep warned of a boarding attempt. One of the assassin ships had extended magnetic clamps onto the hull. The sound of cutting tools echoed faintly through the corridors. Daniel grabbed his rifle and moved quickly to the docking hatch. As the metal began to glow red from the heat of the cutting torch, he crouched low, aiming at the breach point. The hatch blew open and 2 armored figures stepped through, weapons raised. Daniel fired instantly, forcing them to take cover behind the jagged edge of the doorway. From the corridor behind him, a second team tried to flank him. But they didn't expect Lyra. She had taken one of the ship's compact stun pistols and fired at the nearest attacker. The bright arc of energy struck his armor, making him stumble. "Stay back!" Daniel shouted. But Lyra didn't retreat. She ducked behind a bulkhead, firing again to drive the attackers back toward Daniel's line of fire. Her hands trembled, but her aim was steady. Between her shots and Daniel's precise bursts, the first boarding team fell. The others pulled back, retreating to their ships. Daniel sealed the hatch and ran a quick scan. "They're breaking off," he said. "Either we hurt them too much or they got what they came for." Lyra's breathing was uneven. "What they came for?" Daniel frowned. "They didn't send enough men to win a full fight. That means their goal wasn't to kill us outright. Maybe they wanted to test our defenses or mark our ship for tracking." Her eyes darkened. "Then they will follow us to Valara Prime." "Not if we get there first," Daniel replied, already plotting a faster route. They moved to the cockpit, where Lyra sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the star map. "You still don't understand," she said quietly. "The crown is not just a weapon to destroy fleets. It can drain the energy of every ship in range. The Karth wanted it so no one could fight them. The Alliance would use it to make every other power in the galaxy bow to them." Daniel gave her a sideways look. "And you?" She hesitated, then answered. "I would use it only once, to stop the Karth. Then I would seal it forever." "Forever's a long time," Daniel said. "And powerful things have a way of being found again. That's why it must be done by someone who understands its danger," she replied firmly. For a moment, neither spoke. The ship's engines hummed, and the soft beeps of the navigation console filled the silence. Finally, Daniel said, "You know what I see when I look at you. Not a weak alien woman, not a princess. I see someone who's still standing after losing everything." "That's not weakness!" Lyra's expression softened. "And I see a human who should have walked away when he had the chance, but didn't." The moment was broken by a sudden flash on the sensors. Daniel stiffened. "Multiple ships ahead, Karth Dominion signatures." Lyra's breath caught. "They found the route?" Daniel checked the readouts. Looks like they're patrolling the system right before Valara Prime. No way to avoid them without losing days. Then we go through, Lyra said without hesitation. Daniel glanced at her, almost smiling. You've got more steel in you than most soldiers I know. He adjusted the course and powered up the engines. The stars ahead began to stretch as the ship surged forward. Beyond that system lay the ruined homeworld of the Valari people, and the crown of the stars. But Daniel knew one thing. The closer they got, the more dangerous it would become. Assassins, spies, fleets, all of them would be waiting, and none of them would expect that the so-called weakest alien woman might be the most dangerous person in the galaxy. The grand hall of the Zayari capital was silent. Hundreds of alien nobles and military officers sat in curved rows, their strange eyes fixed on the two figures standing in the center. One was Captain Aaron Cole, the human soldier who had won the galaxy's attention. The other was Lyra, the weakest alien woman he had chosen as his reward. Only now she stood tall, her head high, wearing a long robe of silver and blue. The robe shimmered under the hall's lights, marking her not as a servant or a prisoner, but as royalty. The Emperor of Zaire leaned forward on his high throne, his face unreadable. Human, his voice echoed. You chose her. When you could. Have had wealth, land, or the finest of our warriors. Do you understand what you have done? Aaron's voice was calm, steady. I understand exactly. She's not weak. She's the strongest among you. The crowd stirred, whispers flowing through the hall like ripples in water. Many of them had never seen Lyra without the plain clothes she wore during her captivity. None had known who she really was, except Aaron. He took a step forward. During the siege of Vera IV, I saw her, not on the battlefield but in the chaos, behind it. She was protecting a group of wounded civilians armed with nothing but a broken spear. She stood against a squad of soldiers until help arrived. I didn't forget that. Lyra's eyes softened, a faint smile touching her lips. Aaron continued. When the war ended and the rewards were offered, everyone expected me to take something grand. But I saw her again, standing in the back, hidden, ignored. I knew then that she wasn't just a survivor, she was a leader, and I was right. The Emperor's gaze shifted to Lyra. Daughter, he said quietly. Is this true? Gasps filled the room. The word daughter hit the crowd like thunder. Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was clear, firm. It is. I am Princess Lyra of Zaire, third in line to the throne. I was sent away during the invasion to keep me safe, but I refused to hide. The humans captured me thinking I was just another refugee. I stayed silent, because revealing who I was would have put my people in greater danger. The nobles exchanged shocked glances. Some looked ashamed. Aaron glanced around the hall. You all saw her as weak because she wasn't in armor or holding a title. But strength isn't about rank. It's about what someone is willing to stand for even when they're alone. The Emperor slowly rose to his feet. His towering figure loomed over the gathering. Human soldier, you have done something rare. You saw what my own council could not. You judged her not by power or blood, but by courage. Lyra turned to Aaron, her voice soft now. When you chose me, I thought it was pity, but it wasn't. You understood me before anyone else did. Aaron gave a faint smile. You fought for your people. That's worth more than any medal. The Emperor raised a hand, silencing the murmurs in the hall. From this day forward, Princess Lyra will resume her place in the royal court, and you, Captain Cole, will be named Protector of the Crown. Your loyalty will be remembered by both our peoples. The crowd rose in respect. Some bowed, others simply stared, still processing what they had learned. For Aaron, it didn't matter about titles or rewards. He had seen injustice and he had acted. That was enough. As the ceremony ended, Lyra stepped close to him. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. Aaron shrugged. "Sometimes you just have to remind people what real strength looks like." She smiled, and for the first time since the war began, the galaxy felt a little less divided, the far. Human Soldier had chosen the weakest alien woman, only to show the universe that she was never weak at all. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as Daniel Rourke stared out at the stars. Valara Prime was ahead, his mission, their hope, and perhaps their last chance. Beside him, Lyra stood tall now. No longer the frightened woman who had hidden behind her weakness. She was the last Valari princess, ready to reclaim her heritage. Yet in her eyes, Daniel saw something more. Fear, yes, but also determination. "We've come too far," Daniel said quietly. "No one's going to take you from me now." Lyra nodded. "And if they do, I will fight." The journey had been long and dangerous. Assassins had attacked them in deep space. Spies from the Alliance and the Karth Dominion had hunted them relentlessly. But Daniel's steady hand had guided them through every storm. Now they had arrived in Valara's orbit, but the greatest challenge awaited below. The moon that orbited the planet was shattered. Pieces of rock floating like jagged teeth in the void. Hidden within was the crown of the stars, the ancient weapon Lyra's family had created to defend their world. Daniel activated the ship's scanners. "The weapon's energy signature is faint but stable. It's still there." Lyra's voice was steady. "We have to reach it before they do." The two prepared to board the shuttle that would take them to the shattered moon. As they suited up, Daniel looked at her. "You ready?" She smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd be, but yes. For my people, for you, for all of us." The shuttle dropped through the debris field carefully. Jagged rocks loomed on every side. The wreckage of old Valari ships drifted silently, a reminder of the war and loss. At last, they landed near a cavern entrance, hidden beneath twisted metal and stone. "This is it," Lyra said. "The gateway to the crown." Inside, the walls shimmered with ancient technology. Symbols glowed faintly on the surfaces, and the air felt charged. Daniel followed her deeper, alert for danger. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the chamber, a soft, mechanical hum growing louder. "The weapon's core," Lyra whispered. "It's alive." As they moved toward the control chamber, alarms suddenly blared. A squad of Karth soldiers appeared from the shadows, weapons raised. Daniel stepped forward, firing precise bursts. Lyra moved beside him, using her knowledge of the ruins to avoid traps and guide their path. The battle was fierce. Daniel's combat skills and Lyra's quick thinking kept them alive, but more soldiers kept coming. "We can't hold them off forever," Daniel said, ducking behind cover. Lyra nodded. "I'll activate the crown. You cover me." Inside the control room, Lyra approached a console covered with glowing runes. She placed her hands on it. "Only a Valari royal can activate this," she said, eyes closed. Daniel watched the door, rifle ready. Suddenly, the console sparked and hummed louder. Energy flowed through the room. The crown of the stars awoke. Outside, the Karth soldiers hesitated as the weapon's power surged. Ships across the nearby star systems began to lose power. Their engines stalled, weapons offline. The Karth fleet was trapped, unable to fight or flee. Daniel smiled grimly. It worked. Back in the chamber, Lyra opened her eyes, calm but weary. "We must be careful," she warned. "This power can destroy entire worlds if misused." Daniel nodded. "We'll use it once, to end this war, and then we'll make sure it's never used again." With the Karth fleet disabled, the Alliance fleet moved in swiftly. capturing the enemy forces. News spread quickly. The war was over. Weeks later, on Valara Prime's surface, a ceremony was held. Lyra was crowned queen. Her people gathered around. Her Daniel stood beside her, not as a conqueror, but as a friend. The galaxy watched in awe. Lyra addressed the crowd. This victory was not mine alone. It was shared by all who stood for justice, and by one human soldier who saw strength where others saw weakness. She turned to Daniel. You chose me when no one else would. You believed in me. Daniel smiled. Because I knew who you really were. The story of the human soldier and the Valari princess spread across the stars. A tale of courage, trust, and unexpected strength. Of how the weakest woman became the greatest hope, and how one man's faith changed the fate of a galaxy.